he just went low. He's in his head. He's in his head. He's open. His head wide open. Cracked open in the face.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Mario Mantis 100 back again with another episode of How's My Team. We're going to talk about the women's Giants team, and we're also going to talk about Liverpool because we've got two games to talk about with Liverpool. Not much to talk about. Obviously, the miscellaneous stuff is more so the stuff that we're going to talk about, a heap of stuff, but considering most of the seasons, including the NRL season, it's pretty much over. Today's obviously NRL Grand Final day, so the season will be over for both the men and the women's teams. At the end of today, obviously recording the first part of this video on the Sunday, and I'll be recording the rest of it on Monday and probably putting it out on Tuesday. So not a lot to talk about in terms of my teams, but there's a lot to talk about in terms of miscellaneous stuff. But let's get started with this video. So I decided to wear my old Titans jersey, just obviously because of Grand Final day for the NRL Grand Final. But we got to talk about the Giants women's team. They played yesterday in the afternoon in the AFLW, and it was another loss to the Giants against the Saints. The Saints scored 30, Giants 16. So 4 goals 6 to the Saints to 2 goals 4 for the Giants. Didn't watch this game at all. I had an opportunity to go down to watch the game. Unfortunately, I was working yesterday. Did pick up an extra shift, obviously on the Friday. But obviously could have went to this game in Sydney if I wanted to with my dad a couple of weeks ago, because they were actually ringing up some members to actually go. So I don't know how much of a crowd was there at Henson Park in Sydney, but it was 1 goal to St Kilda to no score for the Giants in the first quarter. Then it was 1 goal 3. Actually, it was only a behind, rather, for the Saints in the second quarter. So they increased their lead by 1 point. And then actually the Giants ended up scoring 1 goal 2. So it ended up only being a 1 point lead into the half for St Kilda. And then St Kilda kind of exploded after that. We didn't score any points in the third quarter as we did with the first, whereas St Kilda scored 3 goals 1 in the third quarter, and then in the fourth quarter St Kilda scored 2 behinds, whereas the Giants scored 1 goal 2 in the last. So St Kilda won by 14 points at the end of it. Really, again, the Giants didn't really challenge that much at all. Though, in saying that, with a low-scoring game, possibly could have been good defense, but obviously with the scores being 2 goals 4 and 4 goals 6, with it being 10 behinds to 6 goals, they might have been wayward in front of goal as well, so that doesn't help things at all. Obviously, our next game is next Saturday in Geelong on GMHBA, so actually we'll be playing the Cats at their home ground, so we'll see if the Giants can end up doing the double at the Cattery with both the men's and the women's teams. The men's and women's teams. So unfortunately with that loss, yes, we still stay in 15th position rather, because their percentage obviously didn't take a great amount of a hit with a 14-point loss, but obviously there are still some games to play. Collingwood has still got to play against the West Coast Eagles. Richmond have got to play against Adelaide and try and win to get off the bottom of the ladder. Though I don't see it at this point. Looks like the Suns got absolutely smashed because their percentage is actually lower. The Richmond's actually, they're at 37%. I haven't seen a percentage down that far for a long time. But at the moment, obviously, with some games still to play, I think Adelaide obviously is still going to play. Carlton is still going to play. West Coast obviously is still going to play. And Geelong, and then obviously Collingwood and Richmond, as I said, they've still got to play games at this point. But the top 8 at the moment is the Kangaroos on top still. They convincingly beat the Sydney Swans. So the Swans are actually outside of the 8 right now, in 9th position on percentage. I was going to say for and against, but percentage with the West Coast Eagles. Obviously, if the West Coast Eagles do lose to Collingwood and lose by a decent chunk, they'll drop under because they'll be on the same amount of points and the same amount of wins as the Swans. But obviously, their percentage is only 2.6 at the moment ahead of the Swans. So if it gets a decent hit, they'll drop into 9th. But at this point in time, the Kangaroos are still unbeaten. I think it's like 17, 18 in a row, maybe like into the 20s now. Just crazy. Melbourne in 2nd, Hawthorn in 3rd, Brisbane in 4th. So they're all on the same amount of points. Adelaide have still got to play a game, as well as Carlton. They're all on the same amount of points as Brisbane at the moment. So with the percentage, there is a possibility that Adelaide could jump Brisbane if they win by a decent chunk against Richmond. But obviously with Carlton, they're like 30 percentage points adrift. So even with a win, they'll still jump because obviously they'll. I'm like, what am I saying? Because Brisbane are on 20 points right now. So if Adelaide and Carlton both win, they'll go up to 24. So they'll jump the Brisbane Lions into the top 4. It'll just obviously be a fight between Adelaide and Carlton. Most likely Adelaide will jump into the 4. Carlton will be in 5th if they both win. Carlton have actually got to play Geelong, so we'll see what happens with that. St Kilda in 7th with their win over the Giants. Also on 20 points, but obviously they were a game behind as well. Though if Adelaide and Carlton obviously lose, they'll be on the same win-loss record as St Kilda and as Brisbane as well. And then obviously rounding out the top 8 is West Coast Eagles, Swans in 9th, Geelong in 10th, Port Adelaide in 11th, Essendon in 12th, Fremantle in 13th, Western Bulldogs in 14th, obviously the Giants, as I said, in 15th, Collingwood in 16th, the Gold Coast Suns in 17th, and Richmond Tigers in last place with no wins on the board as of yet. But yeah, 14-point loss to the Saints. Probably a close game, but probably should have won this game. But next week's a big game for them because they go to the Cattery next week, and honestly, in essence, basically playing since they're on 8 points, they're 4 wins away from finals. I think their finals lives are on the line next week, basically, at this point, because they've got to win the next 4 games. Which, I mean, all the teams around the last 4 games, obviously Geelong in 10th at the moment. Fremantle is the week after on the Saturday at Henson Park, and they're in 13th at the moment, obviously with other results pending. The highest position, obviously, out of the 4 sides is Carlton in 6th, obviously, at the moment, at 6th. That's the Sunday the week after that in Melbourne, and then playing Port Adelaide in the last round, though it doesn't have a date on that. So currently 2 and 6. The Giants, not great, but obviously, I think they got two games behind. I keep thinking it's 2 points, but no, it's 4 points in the AFL and AFLW. So they're actually only 2 points out of the 8 at this point in time. Obviously, with West Coast, if they do win against Collingwood, then obviously it will be 3 wins outside of the 8, the top 8. So the Giants really got to kick into gear and try and win some of these games. If they win the next 2 games, it'd be great for them because obviously they'll be on 16 points of that and they'll give themselves a shot to go into the finals. And then obviously going into that Carlton game, which will be huge for them. But we'll see what happens, when it comes to the AFLW. You never really know how your side's going to go because 1 week you can get blown out and then the next week you can blow another side out. So I don't know. But 14-point loss is not bad, but a loss nonetheless for the Giants women's team. And we've got more losses on the docket because obviously, as we said, we were talking about the women's Giants team. But we also got to talk about Liverpool. And like I said, there is some losses that we've got to talk about. Obviously, we lost against Crystal Palace in the Premier League. And we've lost 3 straight, actually. We've lost the next 2 games after that because obviously we had Champions League football during the middle of the week. And it was a 1-0 loss to Galatasaray. I think that's how that's supposed to be pronounced. Galatasaray. Galatasaray. Obviously playing in Istanbul. We had a couple of injuries, obviously, as well in that game. I think Allison was an injured player. But yeah, not a great result for Liverpool because they scored in the 16th minute and they didn't really look back. There was a couple of injuries in that game in particular for Liverpool was not great, including Alison Becker, which didn't end up being great. As far as I know, they're not too badly injured, but obviously they might be off for a few weeks, the 2 players that were out. We did go into, obviously, the Premier League game against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. We went in a couple of players banged up, but obviously had some substitutions as well, and players that obviously haven't played that much in terms of the season so far in this game. And it was a 2-1 loss to Chelsea as well. So Chelsea ended up being ahead 1-0, scored in the 14th minute. Cody Gakpo ended up scoring in the 63rd minute to get a 1-1. And like we did with Crystal Palace, we ended up getting scored against in stoppage time at the end of the game. It was 6 minutes of stoppage time after the 90 minutes were up for Chelsea to get a 2-1 win over Liverpool. And yeah, it's not a great situation, obviously, to lose back-to-back games in the Premier League. This almost basically the same way. In fact, actually, let me have a look. Now, was it the same time as well? It was not. It was 7 minutes of stoppage time in the Crystal Palace game. So pretty substantial amount of stoppage time in both games, which kind of sucks. But yeah, it was obviously actually it does say in the article there was 5 changes to the lineup from the game midweek, obviously with the Champions League, which is not a bad situation. Obviously, it's one of those things where you're using players and you're going to be chopping and changing them a lot when they come in and then go out. Obviously, with Champions League football also being a thing. So it makes it very interesting in terms of results because Right now in the Champions League table, Bayern Munich are on top with Real Madrid. PSG are in third, so they must have lost or drew or something. Or it might have been just on goals because they're on top with 6 points. So I think actually all those teams are undefeated right now. I think it's no, sorry, no, they've either lost or won or something. No, they've only played 2 games, but yeah, they must have won. But Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, PSG, Inter Milan, and Arsenal in your top 5. Karabag, I'm not sure if that's how that's pronounced. It starts with a Q, so I got no idea in terms of pronunciation on that. Borussia Dortmund and Man City round out your top 8 in the Champions League. Then it's Spurs, Atletico Madrid, and Newcastle with Martial, Club Brugge, Sporting CP, Eintracht, Barcelona, and then Liverpool in 17th with Chelsea in 18th and Napoli in 19th. So we lost to a side that was, I think, in the bottom 8. Galatasaray are now in 21st position. Liverpool are in 17th, so they're right in like the knockout stage. In terms of there's a few decent sides in here. Obviously Spurs, Atletico Madrid, Newcastle, Martial, Club Brugge, Sporting CP, Barcelona's in this group. Chelsea, Napoli, Juventus is also another one. Atalanta. Bodo Glimt is also in there, and then outside of that, and being on the verge of elimination, though it's only been 2 games, obviously, Leverkusen is in there, Villarreal is in there, PSV is in there. There's a few sides that I do recognise. Benfica as well. So. Yeah, not great with two games going, and we're down in basically a little bit less than the middle. Obviously, I think the fact that we're on 0 in terms of goal difference doesn't help that as well. And in the Premier League, we actually do drop a position. Obviously, we have not all the games in the Premier League this week have not actually played. So right now, Liverpool have actually dropped from first to second with that loss, with Arsenal getting up in their game and moving up to 16 points, whereas Liverpool's on 15. Spurs are on 14, Bournemouth is on 14, and Crystal Palace has still got a game in hand, and they're in 5th position with 12 points. So if they do win, they will jump Liverpool as well, to go into 2nd position and push Liverpool into 3rd position. Then Chelsea in 6th position, Sunderland dropped to 7th, Man City dropped to 8th. Man United, obviously, with that 2-0 win over Sunderland, jump into 9th, and Everton dropped to 10th. Brighton in 11th, Fulham in 12th, Leeds in 13th. Though with Everton and Brighton, they both have a game in hand as well. Then you go down to Fulham, Leeds United, and then most of these sides in the bottom, except for West Ham, have all got a game in hand. So Brentford, Newcastle, Aston Villa, Nottingham Forest, Burnley, West Ham obviously have played the extra game, so they're in 19th position in the relegation zone with Burnley. Burnley are on the same amount of points, though they do have a game in hand, and Wolves are still on the bottom with a game to play for them as well with 1 point. So not a great result obviously for Liverpool this week. Obviously in the next game, there is an international break, so we won't be playing until the 20th of October on the Monday, 2:30 at my time. So it'll be a couple of weeks before Liverpool play again. We have a couple of weeks of international football to go over. So not a great result as a Liverpool supporter, but we do play Man United at Anfield on the 20th. So big game there. Then we play the Thursday, 6 a.m. my time, with Eintracht in Frankfurt actually. So we're going to play the Dutch, and then the Sunday after that. So we'll be playing 3 games in the space of a week. We'll be playing against Brentford on the 26th away. So it'll be 6 a.m. my time on Sunday, obviously with daylight savings going on. So then we got Australian, we're one of the states that has daylight savings, so obviously a lot of those times have all shifted. So it would have been 1:30 in the morning my time with Man United game, 5 a.m. with the Champions League game, 5 a.m. for the Brentford game as well. So yeah, pretty hectic end of October, because then we play right at the end on the 30th at 6:45 a.m. my time on Thursday at Anfield. I should say Thursday, October 30th. We're playing Crystal Palace again in the Carabao Cup. So the League Cup in the round of 16. So yeah, so it's going to be an interesting month of October. We'll see what happens. Obviously got some. Obviously haven't started great in terms of October, but maybe the international break might give us a little bit of a breather, a little bit of a leg up as well, and we'll see how we go when we come back against Man United. But yeah, 2-1 loss to Chelsea and 1-0 loss in the Champions League for Liverpool. And well, it's very late. It's on Tuesday now, Tuesday morning. I didn't expect to actually record this late, but was busy yesterday morning and did a few things. But obviously we're going to end this episode of How's My Team. So we're just going to go over some miscellaneous stuff and obviously some catch up. Liverpool, just to update on that, has not moved from second. They're still in second because Crystal Palace did end up losing yesterday morning. So Liverpool will stay in second position, which is good for Liverpool. Crystal Palace stay in sixth position, with Man City moving up to fifth position with a win yesterday as well. Very early goal in that game. And the Giants are still in 15th position. But there was Richmond, the Richmond Tigers, end up moving off the bottom of the ladder because they ended up having a win over the Adelaide Crows. Very unlikely win, but they did win for the first time this season, of course, with their percentage being at 62% now. They move off the bottom of the ladder, and the Gold Coast Suns, who did obviously beat the Giants a few weeks ago, are on the bottom with 37% percentage, which is really low. I didn't expect it. In fact, actually, Richmond have actually got a better percentage than Collingwood does, though Collingwood did lose to the West Coast Eagles over the weekend, so on Sunday. So possibly maybe that's why it's dropped that low, because they didn't get beaten. Like, they got beaten by a chunk of points against the West Coast Eagles, but not by a lot. So your top 8 at the moment is the Kangaroos, Melbourne, Hawthorn, and Carlton move into 4th position with a win, which pushes Brisbane out to 5th. West Coast move up to 6th position. Adelaide move down to 7th position with the loss and also the percentage difference as well. And then St Kilda are in 8th position. So that's just some catch up on the teams that I'm obviously going for. Obviously the Chicago Cubs, last time we spoke, were playing in the wildcard round. They made it through. It was 2-1. They ended up going the full 3 games to win. They did lose their first game in the divisional series against the Brewers, but they do play today when I upload this and when I'm recording this. They'll be playing today. They'll be playing at around 12 my time. So the Dodgers and the Phillies are playing at the moment. They're in the bottom of the third, and the Phillies have got someone on base. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting position. Obviously, the Toronto Blue Jays are in front 2-0 in their division series against the Yankees, blowing them out pretty much from the get-go. And the Detroit Tigers and the Seattle Mariners are at a 1-1 tie at the moment, so it goes to best of three, with a 3-2 win yesterday for them, when Cubs went down 9-3 in the first game against the Brewers, if anybody want to know what the score was. But the Yankees have been blown out, 23 runs to 8 in the last two games, so they're on the verge of elimination. In fact, actually the first team, and realistically the only team right now that are on the verge of elimination. Obviously, if the Chicago Cubs lose today against the Brewers, then they're on the verge of elimination as well as if the Dodgers win against the Phillies as well. So, interesting situation for them. So it's in daylight savings time now for my state. So it's 12:08 p.m. Daylight time when the game starts. So, yeah. Very interesting situation. Really got to talk about the NRL Grand Final, because obviously that happened on Sunday night, and against all odds, Melbourne choked, and the Brisbane Broncos ended up winning I was going to say AFL Grand Final, NRL Grand Final, 26 points to 22, with Melbourne being up 22 points to 12 at halftime, so they didn't score at all in the second half. And yeah, the Brisbane Broncos went on a blitz in the second half, and lost and won the game against Melbourne. And Melbourne basically did what I thought that Brisbane were going to do, and basically choke. And they did. They had a few opportunities to score, and obviously some of the defence, I will say, for Brisbane, in Brisbane's case, in some of those attacking positions, their defence was immense in those, but there was a lot of other opportunities that obviously went begging. A lot of mistakes from Melbourne as well, a lot of drop ball, a lot of miscommunication between players, like a few decisions of running towards the sideline and then being taken over, or missing the ball between your legs somehow, and it going over the sideline on your own accord. With obviously a little bit of pressure coming in, but obviously no contact until actually is well over the sideline, in terms of Will Warbrick's opportunity near the sideline and trying to get that ball. So I don't know what happened with Melbourne, but it felt like the ship kind of in the second half, they didn't really show up nearly. Well, okay, I wouldn't say that they didn't show up. They didn't show up at their best. Oh, and I'm getting called. Just give me a moment. Well, sorry about that. It was my mum calling, so I had to pick that up. It was work related for her. But yeah, so obviously Brisbane ended up winning, breaking a 19-year drought in terms of premierships. And I'm going to be hearing about this for like a year now, because I know there's a few people that I know that are Brisbane supporters, and yeah, usually, like I said a few weeks ago, usually when it comes to like a grand final and a final series, I'd rather go for like an underdog, like Brisbane Broncos and like the Manly Warringah Seagulls. I was going to say Seagulls. I say that as an insult sometimes to Manly, so I guess the insult kind of took over there. But Sea Eagles. Both of those clubs, I'd rather not win a premiership, especially in Brisbane's case, because obviously I'm a Titans supporter, and obviously they're like the closest rival to us in Queensland, only being like maybe an hour down the road from the Gold Coast. So it's one of those things where, or within that hour, I mean, it's been a while since I travelled from the Gold Coast to Brisbane, and even just in Queensland in general, so forget how far it does take to travel from the Gold Coast to, obviously, to Brisbane, but they're basically like right down the road in terms of distance compared to obviously like the Gold Coast to Townsville and North Queensland. I mean, in any situation, and obviously the Gold Coast to like all the New South Wales teams as well, including a lot of them obviously in Sydney. But it's one of those things where like usually I go for the underdog. Brisbane and Manly are like some of the like outliers. Like I'd say in the AFL, I guess Sydney is one of them. I guess kind of with that rivalry with the Giants, but I still kind of like the Swans and their organisation, even though obviously yes they're budding rival like a rivalry between them and the Giants obviously. I guess maybe like Collingwood and Geelong. I guess the two big teams that obviously because they're always in and around the mix. If not winning, like if they're not like in the grand final, it's just like they're in the final series, and I kind of don't want them to win. Obviously, with them recently winning premierships as well, so it kind of throws that unbeaten like underdog mentality. Kind of throws that through the wall because like it'd be like it's like say in 2016 where it was Western Bulldogs and Sydney. Sydney had won a premiership maybe 4 years back in terms of their last premiership, and then obviously for the Western Bulldogs it was like 40, 50 years since they last won one, or like at least 30 years, with Richmond in 2017. Obviously with Adelaide it was like 20 odd years. Richmond had been 30 odd years. I think it was 37 years. Melbourne in 2021, obviously 57 years since they last won a premiership and that sort of thing. So I went for all of those teams in terms of actually putting money down and actually betting on it. And even just if I wasn't betting on it, that's usually the team that I'd go for. But it's just one of those things where I don't like Brisbane in a lot of cases, and they're a bit arrogant. And obviously they'll say they're the best team ever, with Reece Walsh being the best player in the competition. I don't even think he's the best player on the Brisbane side. I think in terms of like him making explosive plays and lead up plays, like he's really, really good. But there's other players on the team that there consistently and really don't have a bad game. You look at like Payne Haas. I know he's a New South Wales Blue, so then maybe there's a little bit of bias there, but like he plays mostly 80 minutes in the trenches, in the middle. He can get involved, and even on a bad day where Brisbane are playing horribly, a lot of the time he's playing a good game and trying to keep his team in contention of winning any particular game, or trying to keep them in it, even though they might be getting buried. Reece Walsh, I look at him, and some people will say, he's the best player ever, but he's one of those players that flip-flops. He might have a really, like obviously during the final series he did reasonably well, but there's a lot of games where he goes missing. Like he's not there. He's maybe throwing his hand a little bit too much, that he's doing too much for the team to try and get them into the game. And like I don't hate him for trying things, but obviously it's like sometimes he's diamonds and sometimes he's rocks. Like he's very inconsistent, and that's something that I'd say with some of the best players in the competition. You don't usually get that. You look at like say James Tedesco from the Sydney Roosters. I know that's like I guess the comparison, like I go with that because obviously they're both fullbacks, and like Tedesco, yes, can have some really, really bad games, but he's mostly very consistent, or at least tries to be. And even then, even when he's having a bad day, there's a lot of players around him that can obviously have a really impact the game well enough to get him involved in better ways, including obviously assisting him in tries and stuff like that. So it's one of those things where I can understand, like, if Reece Walsh really works on his game, and obviously yes, does play his hand obviously in what he can see, but if he's more consistent in games and being involved, he'll be a better player. That's the thing. Like, I think even looking back when he was at the Warriors, for example. He did that a lot. Obviously, he had some really, really bad games there, but he was more consistent there, even though he was only there for a couple of years. Like, he was more consistent in terms of playing in their system, and obviously having, Sean Johnson there at the same time, having Chanel Harris-Tavita there as well, having some of the older players there and some of the playmakers there, makes the job a little bit easier. But, obviously Reece Walsh a little bit obnoxious, and I guess that's why I don't like Brisbane and Manly in that case as well, because they're a bit obnoxious. I guess in some form or fashion, a lot of people will fall that with Melbourne, and I kind of hate Melbourne in terms of how much success they've had since being added to the competition, but they consistently done it over and over. They've been consistent in terms of the way that they play their football, the way that they manage to get into almost the top four pretty much every year that they get into the final series, basically almost every year. Being a consistent record of winning the first game of the season every year. Like, they've consistently been doing that, I think, since Craig Bellamy actually took over the Storm. They haven't lost a game in round one for the longest time. In fact, I think during his entire tenure, they haven't lost in round one. So it's pretty crazy. A pretty crazy record, that one. Though they've almost lost a few times, obviously. But they've been very consistent and been the benchmark of the competition for the last 2 decades, maybe 2.5 decades. And it's just one of those things where it's just it's really, really weird. But, they're consistent, but they choked. I will say that they didn't really choke last year because obviously Penrith were playing at a much higher level. Their defense, Penrith's defense was immense. Obviously holding the Melbourne Storm to 8 points last year. So there was immense. Their attack was pretty much better than the Storm as well. And it's just one of those things where they didn't really, Melbourne didn't really choke last year. They just were outplayed. Whereas this year, they had them on the front foot. They were in front by 10 points at halftime. They even said they knew that the momentum that Brisbane had in the second half, in the final series in general, with games against the Canberra Raiders and obviously against Penrith as well in that prelim final, that they're a better second half team than they are a first half team. And ultimately the second half of the grand final showed that, and it really is a situation where Melbourne had their foot on the throat. They could have killed them. I'm not literally killed them, but they had them under pressure. They could have had them collapse basically, and they let go, and they choked. They literally choked. I can't describe it any different than that. And I don't know where Melbourne go from here. Obviously, with expansion teams coming in 2027, so not obviously next season coming, but obviously the season after, it's going to be interesting to see what happens at the end of the trade, like trade period and all that type of stuff. Of obviously, when November comes along and people are moving clubs or looking to other clubs and seeing what offers they can get for future years, and obviously with future contracts as well. Obviously Perth Bears, slowly but surely getting into the swing of things and actually trying to be a part of the competition. Obviously they join in 2027. And then we should be hearing stuff from PNG, if that is still going, that deal, in the next year or two as well, because I think they join in 2028, I believe. So it'll be coming up very, very soon as well. But yeah, so obviously Brisbane 26, Melbourne 22 in the grand final. NRLW, obviously, against the top 2 teams in that, was Brisbane coming out in a late try over the Sydney Roosters. And I will say that Brisbane had them in the first half, and they very much were under pressure in the second half. Sydney Roosters made too many errors, especially in the first half. They put them behind the 8 ball. They really come out swinging in the second half, which I'm glad for, because it made the game a little bit more respectable. But in the end, try or no try, it looked like eventually They got the try down for Brisbane. It looked like she might have been held up with her own hand. But I think eventually before the play was called dead, I'm pretty sure she got the ball down, maybe on like the fifth attempt when she was over the try line, but wouldn't count as obviously a double movement because obviously she was in the try scoring area. Unless she had dropped the ball, I don't see how that would have been, unless they called it held up beforehand and then she got the ball down. But I think it was a try, so it was Brisbane going over the Sydney Roosters like they did in 2020 and as they did in 2016. So very consistent from the Broncos in the grand final against the Sydney Roosters. That's the third time that they faced each other and the third time that Brisbane have won over the Sydney Roosters. So very interesting stat there, and obviously breaks a 5-year drought for the Brisbane women's team. And I think they're up to 5 premierships now, with the Roosters with 4, and I think Newcastle with 2. I think that's right. Off the top of my head, I think that's right, but it's one of those things. And then obviously in the state championship, obviously it was the New South Wales Cup and Queensland Cup sides going against each other. Obviously the New Zealand Warriors in the New South Wales Cup ended up winning the competition there. The Burleigh Bears won the Queensland Cup, and it was a pretty convincing win. It was a 30-point win to the Warriors over the Bears. It was 50 points to 20. Though it was 50 points to like 12 or 10, I think, for a while, for like a decent chunk. But yeah, I think in the last like 10, 15 minutes, obviously, the Warriors ended up having a couple of tries conceded by them, but they won on the day, and I'm glad that the New Zealand Warriors have something that they can say that they've won something on grand final day. They've been to the grand final a couple of times over the years, but having a state championship, I know it's obviously not the premiership for the NRL, but at least it's something. It's something that they can build off of, and a lot of the players that are in the Warriors side of the New South Wales Cup, there's a lot of good players that played NRL. I think Causy's in there. Tanner Boyd showed up in that game as well. He was in there. I think he was in the New South Wales Cup for a lot of this year anyway. With Luke Metcalf playing, Harris DeVito also playing. Excuse me. And I feel like I got a tickle like right at the back of my throat. So, but Tanner showed up in the New South Wales Cup, and a lot of people will probably say, "Oh, but these players played NRL." It's like, yeah, but they're not necessarily the first picks when it comes to the Warriors side. So of course they're going to be in the New South Wales Cup, and then obviously there will be a discourse of people. Obviously, will probably say, "Oh, but New Zealand's not part of New South Wales." Well, ultimately, that's the competition that they're accepted in. They could have their own competition, but they don't. And obviously, with the NRL say that it's not illegal. Obviously, if they were playing in any competition, obviously they'd play in Victoria if they had to. But Melbourne's one of the only teams, and I think Melbourne feeder clubs are in Queensland, and I know more of them are in-house now in terms of Melbourne getting obviously some talent from the Melbourne system, and obviously the pathways to the Melbourne Storm now. But consistently over the years, Melbourne have had feeder clubs from Queensland and the Queensland Cup, so Queensland Cup sides, I should say. So it's one of those things where it's just like, you can complain all you want that New Zealand's not in New South Wales, but that's the competition that they're in. They could play in the Queensland Cup, they could have, but obviously PNG is not really part of Queensland, and they're in the Queensland competition, Queensland Cup competition, and then they play relatively well most years. So I don't get it, but props obviously to the Warriors, and then obviously props to the Broncos, I guess, in both the men's and women's teams in the grand final. But I reckon that'll be it for this episode of How's My Team, and I just want to make an announcement at the end of this video that I'm going to take a couple of weeks off from the How's My Team series. Obviously, we don't have too much to talk about in terms of my team. Obviously, we'll be talking about like the Cubs. I might record obviously some little things here and there when it comes to this, but like I think we probably won't start until obviously the Australia Cup or Australia Championship. Oh, the Australia Cup! I almost forgot. Newcastle ended up winning 3-1 over Heidelberg on Saturday, and actually played on Saturday. So I forgot to mention that on top of the docket as well. But Newcastle Jets ended up winning. Went to extra time, so it was 1-1 at full time. Went to extra time and they scored two goals. So almost forgot about that. That would have been very bad of me to forget that. First time in 17 years, I think it was, for the Newcastle Jets to win a premiership or any type of silverware in general. So props to them. Obviously, with Mark Milligan at the coaching role in that club, has changed the club around in a very, very small amount of time. Obviously, they played consistently towards the end of last year as well, but they're under a lot of limbo for a lot of years there, and obviously the club almost disappeared entirely, like obviously kind of like Western United kind of is in that limbo now, where they were kind of a little bit adrift somewhere and they didn't really know where they were going to go. But props to them, props to Mark Milligan, obviously his coaching staff. They've obviously got some really, really good coaches there. They've got some really good players there. I reckon they're going to shake things up in terms of the A-League. If they don't have any injuries, they're going to go reasonably well. And Heidelberg didn't play that badly as well. Obviously, they actually ended up scoring first, so they ended up having all the pressure off them initially. So it was just obviously trying to stay consistent, and then they kind of fell apart after extra time. But they've been reasonably around the mix in terms of the competition. And obviously, they play in a couple of weeks with the Australian Championship because they're obviously a part of that as well. So I'll be taking a couple of weeks off. The A-League doesn't start until the 17th of October. So that's obviously a couple of weeks. It's now the 7th today, so obviously it's like 10, 12 days away. So I'll take a couple of weeks off, or at least take a week off. Things just to reset. Seattle, I will say Seattle Seahawks as well, just to mention them. They also lost. They lost pretty close. They lost by 3 points to the Buccaneers. I think it was 36-33. I think it ended up being at the end. I do have a photo of it, so I think it was 3 points, but I could be mistaken. It could have been less than that. Let me have a look. It's here somewhere. No, it's not that one. Where are you? I cannot find it. I thought I got a photo of it. Anyway, I can go into my Facebook anyway, because it's on there. I know it's on there, because I got a notification. Okay. 38-35 rather, so it's still 3 points, but I think actually Seattle were in front, I think, at the end, towards the end of the game, and then obviously they tied it up relatively close, but ultimately I felt like we were going to lose against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay have been in close games pretty much the entire season so far, so they did end up losing Seattle, but can't fault the effort in terms of the team. Obviously, it's one of those things where it's always going to be a difficult play against them. Tampa Bay have been up there for the last couple of years under Baker Mayfield, and he's a great player. The team is a good team. They had a couple of players out. We also had a couple of players out as well. So we'll mention that. But I will take at least a week off. Obviously, you know, we obviously have the AL League playing in a couple of weeks. So we have the Wanderers playing on the Saturday. So we'll get into a situation where I'll take a week off, and then we'll reset. Obviously, Liverpool don't play until after that. They play on the Monday, I think, is what I said earlier in the episode. Yeah, they play Monday the 20th. So we'll take a week off from the series just to reset things. Obviously, we won't have too much to talk about next week because obviously A-League hasn't started, NRL, NRLW, AFL, AFLW obviously still going on, but a lot of those seasons are all done. A-League, like I said, doesn't start until the 17th of October. We're on international break in terms of the Premier League as well. So we'll take a week off just to reset things, just to have a break in transmission, and then we'll be back obviously with a week after the weekend of the 17th and up till the 20th, just to talk about Liverpool, obviously how they go against Manchester United. We'll also talk about obviously the Wanderers' first game of the year. We'll talk about the Cubs obviously because when we'll come back they'll either be out or still be playing. We'll talk about Seattle and how they're doing. And yeah, we'll go from there because obviously some of my teams won't be back playing until a little bit later. So you're just going to take a week off, reset things, just have a little bit of a break. I guess kind of had this a couple of weeks back when I went on holidays over the weekend in terms of going back to my hometown, but we're going to have a proper week off. So we won't have an episode next week, but we should have one the week after. So with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. Sorry about the ramble and the rants and a few things this episode, but it does pad out the length. But obviously when you're not scripting a lot of things, you're going to ramble, and I do that a lot, as a lot of people know. But yeah, it just makes the episodes a little bit longer, I guess. But yeah, with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of How's My Team. This has been Mario Man 100. You guys have a great day or night, and of course, take care.